You're holding a bill worth 4 trillion marks. You can't buy bread with it, so you wallpaper your bathroom instead. This is a real photograph from Berlin, November 1923. Children are stacking cash like building blocks because actual paper money has become cheaper than toys. A wheelbarrow stuffed with bills buys one loaf of bread in the morning. By afternoon, you need two wheelbarrows. This isn't some dystopian fiction. This actually happened in the country that would launch the deadliest war in human history just 6 years later. What if the hyperinflation didn't just damage Germany? What if it created the conditions that made Hitler inevitable? Your retirement savings, gone in 18 months. You're a middle-class teacher in Munich, 1922. You've been saving for 30 years. Your savings account holds 60,000 marks. That's enough for a house. That's your children's education. That's your dignity as a human being. By December 1923, 60,000 marks buys you 3 eggs. Not a dozen. 3. The number you need to wrap your head around is 4,200,000,000,000%. That's not the total inflation over the entire period. That's the inflation rate in a single month. November 1923. Prices doubled every 3 days. Let that sink in for a second. Monday your rent is 100 marks. Thursday it's 200. Sunday it's 400. 2 weeks later it's 6,400. Your salary arrives and it's already worthless. This wasn't some abstract economic concept. This actually happened to 7 million German families. Here's what the textbooks don't tell you. The hyperinflation wasn't some random accident. It was a deliberate choice. Let me walk you through the mechanism. June 28, 1919. The Treaty of Versailles gets signed. Germany must pay 132 billion gold marks in reparations. That's $33 billion in 1919 money, 442 billion in today's dollars. But here's the problem. Germany doesn't have any gold. They just lost the war. The Allies took the gold reserves. So Germany faces a choice. Default immediately and face military occupation, or print money and hope for the best. They chose hope. The Reichsbank printing presses start running 24 hours a day. 1,000 printing companies get contracted to help. They literally can't print fast enough. By 1923, they're printing bills in denominations of 100 trillion marks. The ink costs more than the actual purchasing power of the bill. But here's the question nobody asks. Who actually benefits from hyperinflation? You're probably thinking nobody. Everyone loses, right? That's wrong. Debtors benefit massively. Anyone who borrowed money in old marks can pay it back in worthless new marks. Factory owners benefit. They borrow millions, buy equipment, then pay back the loans with worthless cash. Their debt evaporates. Their factories remain. Landowners benefit. Mortgages become meaningless. You borrowed 50,000 marks in 1921 for a house. By 1923, 50,000 marks is literally the price of a postage stamp. You own the house free and clear. The government benefits most of all. The 132 billion gold marks in reparations. The German government borrows from its own citizens through war bonds, then inflates the debt away. Brilliant. Cruel. Effective. Now watch who loses. Pensioners. Civil servants. Teachers. Doctors. Lawyers. The professional middle class. Anyone on a fixed income or salary that adjusts slowly. Anyone with savings. These are the people who followed all the rules. They saved. They planned for the future. They trusted the system. The system destroyed them. A 60-year-old civil servant with a pension of 300 marks per month retires in 1920. He's comfortable, secure. By 1923, 300 marks buys him a newspaper. Maybe. He's 70 years old now, too old to go back to work. His entire life savings have turned to ash. This happened to millions of people. The middle class was completely annihilated, not slowly over decades. In 18 months. Here's the historical pattern. Rome, 301 AD. Emperor Diocletian debases the currency to pay for military expansion. Hyperinflation destroys the middle class. Political instability follows. The empire fragments. Spain, 1640. Philip IV inflates the currency to fund the 30 Years' War. Economic collapse. Loss of territories. Political chaos. France, 1790s. The assignat paper currency finances the revolution. Hyperinflation wipes out the middle class. The terror follows. Napoleon rises from the chaos. Do you see it? Hyperinflation doesn't just destroy money. It destroys the social class that stabilizes democracy. The middle class acts as the buffer between the rich and the poor, between capital and labor, between order and chaos. Remove that buffer and society polarizes. The rich and the poor remain. The middle disappears. What fills that void? Germany, 1924. The hyperinflation ends. The Rentenmark stabilizes the currency, but the damage is permanent. 7 million families have lost everything: their savings, their pensions, their future. But more importantly, they've lost something deeper: faith. Faith in democracy, faith in capitalism, faith in the Weimar Republic that allowed this to happen. The middle class doesn't forget something like that. They don't forgive. They're angry. They're humiliated. They want someone to blame. And they want revenge. Here's the uncomfortable truth: Hitler didn't cause the hyperinflation. The hyperinflation caused Hitler. Let me show you the actual votes. The Nazi Party in the May 1928 election receives 2.6% of the vote. They're fringe, irrelevant. Nobody's worried about them. But look closer at the demographics. Who voted Nazi in 1928? The dispossessed middle class. Small business owners ruined by inflation. Pensioners living in poverty. Former professionals now working as laborers. The people who lost everything between 1921 and 1923. There's still a small percentage in 1928 because the economy has actually recovered. The Weimar Republic has stabilized. Money works again. People have jobs. Maybe democracy can actually survive. Then October 1929 hits. The Great Depression. German unemployment goes from 1.3 million in 1929 to 6 million in 1932. Banks fail. Businesses close. The currency doesn't hyperinflate this time, but it doesn't matter. The trauma returns. The middle class remembers. 1921, 1922, 1923. They remember the wheelbarrows full of cash, the worthless pensions, the destroyed savings. They remember the Weimar Republic didn't protect them then. Why would it protect them now? They want someone strong, someone who promises to restore German dignity, someone who blames external enemies for Germany's suffering. July 1932 election. The Nazi Party receives 37.3% of the vote. They're now the largest party in the Reichstag. What changed in 4 years? The Depression activated the hyperinflation trauma. The people who lost everything in the inflation now see it happening again. Different mechanism, same result. Economic devastation. The Nazis promised simple solutions. Blame the Versailles Treaty. Blame the foreign powers. Blame the internal enemies. Restore German strength. Make Germany great again. The traumatized middle class votes for the promise of revenge and restoration. January 30th, 1933. Hitler becomes chancellor. You already know what comes next. But here's what you might not know. Hitler's economic policy is explicitly designed to prevent another hyperinflation. Hjalmar Schacht, Hitler's economics minister, implements strict currency controls. No inflation. The mark stays stable. But the policy has a fundamental problem. Germany needs resources: oil, rubber, steel, food. Resources Germany doesn't have within its borders. Schacht's solution? Barter agreements with other countries. Trade German manufactured goods for raw materials. It actually works. For a while. But barter doesn't scale. Germany's economy grows. The resource needs grow even faster. The barter system can't keep up. By 1936, Germany faces a choice: accept economic limits and slow growth, or acquire resources by force. Hitler chooses force, not just because he's evil, though he absolutely is, but because the economic logic demands it. The German people have been traumatized twice now, first by hyperinflation, then by depression. They will not accept a third economic collapse. The political cost is existential. The Nazi regime survives only if the economy delivers. The economy delivers only if resources flow. Resources flow only through conquest. This is the actual mechanism. Hyperinflation creates trauma. Trauma creates political instability. Instability creates extremism. Extremism requires economic success. Economic success requires expansion. Expansion requires war. March 1938. Germany annexes Austria. The Anschluss. Why Austria? Resources: iron ore, timber, agricultural land. September 1938. Germany takes the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. Why the Sudetenland? Coal, manufacturing capacity, strategic position. March 1939. Germany occupies the rest of Czechoslovakia. Why? The Skoda Works, one of Europe's largest arms manufacturers. Now it's German. September 1939. Germany invades Poland. Why Poland? This time it's not just about resources. It's about space. Lebensraum. Room to grow. Room to extract. Room to sustain an economy that cannot sustain itself without constant expansion. Here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. The hyperinflation of 1921 to 1923 made World War II inevitable. Not just likely, inevitable. Follow the chain of causation. Versailles reparations forced Germany to print money. Hyperinflation destroys the middle class. The destroyed middle class loses faith in democracy. The depression reactivates the trauma. The traumatized population votes for extremism. The extremist regime promises economic stability. Economic stability requires resources. Resources require conquest. Conquest requires war. Each link is directly causal. Remove the hyperinflation and the entire chain breaks. But here's the deeper pattern that most people miss. Hyperinflation doesn't just destroy purchasing power. It destroys time preference. Let me explain what I mean. In a normal economy, you save for the future. You delay gratification. You invest in education, in skills, in relationships that pay off over years or decades. That's long-term thinking. That's what civilization is built on. Hyperinflation completely inverts this. Saving gets punished. Money you hold loses value by the hour. The only rational response is to spend immediately. Convert cash into anything real. Food, tools, property, anything that actually holds value. Your time preference collapses. You stop thinking about next year. You think about tonight. About right now. This psychological shift becomes permanent for many people. The Germans who lived through 1921 to 1923 never recovered the ability to think long-term. They've been burned too badly, betrayed by time itself. The future became a trap. The only safety was immediate, tangible, physical power. Not money, not promises, not treaties. Power. This mindset doesn't support democracy. Democracy requires compromise. Compromise requires trust. Trust requires faith in future reciprocation. Hyperinflation destroys that faith completely. What replaces it? Zero-sum thinking. The belief that resources are fixed. That someone else's gain is automatically your loss. That cooperation is weakness. That only domination brings security. You can see this in Hitler's speeches if you actually read them. Not just the anti-Semitism, though that's definitely there. Read the economic sections. He constantly returns to the theme of German humiliation, German suffering, German economic vulnerability. The promise isn't just racial purity, it's economic security, the restoration of German prosperity, the guarantee that what happened in 1923 will never happen again. This message resonates because the audience remembers, their parents remember, their grandparents remember. The national trauma is still fresh. Hitler doesn't create the trauma, he weaponizes it. Now let me show you the modern parallel. You're probably thinking this is just history. This couldn't happen today. We're too sophisticated now. We have central banks. We have economic theory. We have safeguards in place. Do we? Venezuela, 2018. Annual inflation rate, 1,300,000%. Zimbabwe, 2008. Monthly inflation rate, 79 billion%. Turkey, 2022. Annual inflation rate, 85%. Lebanon, 2021. The pound loses 90% of its value in 2 years. Argentina, 2023. Annual inflation rate, 160%. This is an ancient history. This is happening right now, today. Different countries. Same mechanism. Same results. And here's what should genuinely terrify you. The United States increased the money supply by 40% between 2020 and 2022. 40% in 2 years. The Federal Reserve printed more dollars in 2 years than in the previous century combined. The official inflation rate hit 9% in 2022. The real inflation rate, measuring what people actually buy, was closer to 15%. Your rent, your groceries, your gas, your electricity, everything costs more. Your salary hasn't kept up. You're getting poorer, slowly, not as fast as Weimar Germany. But the mechanism is exactly the same. Print money. Inflate the currency, destroy purchasing power. You're probably thinking the Fed will control it. They'll raise interest rates. They'll slow the economy down. They'll stop the inflation. Maybe they will, or maybe they can't. The U.S. national debt is $33 trillion. The interest payments alone are $1 trillion per year. If interest rates go too high, the government literally can't pay the interest. Default becomes a real possibility. But defaulting on U.S. debt would collapse the entire global financial system. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. 30% of all global transactions use dollars. Dollar collapse means global collapse. So what's the alternative? Print more money. Pay the debt with inflated dollars. But that creates more inflation, which requires more printing. Do you see the spiral? Here's the uncomfortable question. What happens to American society if inflation runs to 20% per year for 5 years? 40%? 60%? Not hyperinflation like Weimar Germany, but sustained high inflation that destroys savings, collapses pensions, impoverishes the middle class. What happens politically? The traumatized population looks for solutions. Simple solutions. Strong leaders. Scapegoats. Enemies to blame. The same exact pattern. Different country. Different decade. Same human psychology underneath. I'm not predicting this will definitely happen. I'm saying the mechanism exists right now. The conditions are already present. The historical precedent is crystal clear. Weimar Germany wasn't some unique situation. It wasn't an aberration. It was a demonstration of what happens when currency collapse meets political instability meets national humiliation. The combination is explosive. Literally. Here's what we know for certain. Hyperinflation destroys the middle class. The destroyed middle class destabilizes democracy. Destabilized democracy creates political extremism. Political extremism seeks scapegoats and solutions through force. This pattern has repeated throughout human history. Rome, Spain, France, Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. The pattern doesn't care about what century you're in or what ideology you have. It only requires the same initial conditions. Currency collapse plus political vulnerability plus national trauma. The lesson isn't that we're doomed to repeat Weimar exactly. The lesson is that economic stability is an absolute prerequisite for political stability. Democracy is fragile. It requires a broad middle class with a real stake in the system, with faith that the future will be better than the past, with trust that playing by the rules actually leads to prosperity. Destroy that faith and democracy dies. Not immediately, gradually, then suddenly all at once. The middle class becomes desperate. The desperate vote for strongmen. The strongmen promise restoration. The restoration requires enemies. The enemies require force. The force requires war. Germany from 1923 to 1939 isn't just a historical curiosity. It's a warning. The mechanism still exists today. Human psychology hasn't changed one bit. The same inputs produce the same outputs. Hyperinflation doesn't just destroy money. It destroys the entire social fabric that makes civilization possible. It destroys time preference. It destroys trust. It destroys the middle class. What grows in those ruins? Violence, extremism, war. You're watching it happen in real time right now. Not in Germany, in multiple countries simultaneously. Venezuela's middle class has been destroyed. 6 million people have fled the country. Turkey's middle class is shrinking rapidly. Savings are worthless. Faith in the system is collapsing. Lebanon's middle class has been completely annihilated. The country teeters on the edge of civil war. Argentina cycles through the same pattern every single generation. Inflation, collapse, extremism, repeat. The pattern is global. The mechanism is universal. The question isn't whether this could happen anymore. It is happening. The real question is whether it happens here, whether the United States, the European Union, the developed democratic world can avoid the trap. Can we maintain currency stability? Can we preserve the middle class? Can we prevent the political radicalization that follows economic devastation? History says it's incredibly hard. The incentives all push toward inflation. Politicians want to spend. Central banks want to accommodate. Debt accumulates. Eventually, someone has to pay. You pay through inflation, or you pay through default, or you pay through war. Someone always pays. Hitler's hyperinflation didn't directly fuel the war. It created the psychological, political, and economic conditions that made war the rational choice for a traumatized population led by extremists. The inflation ended in 1923. The war started in 1939, 16 years apart. But the connection is absolutely direct. The mechanism is crystal clear. The pattern is completely repeatable. And right now, multiple countries are walking the exact same path Germany walked a century ago. Different names, different languages, same destination. What if this time isn't different? What if we're watching the pattern repeat itself? What if the economic choices we're making today are creating the conflicts of tomorrow? The inflation isn't just about prices. It's about time preference, about trust, about the social contract, about whether democracy can survive economic devastation. Germany proved it can't, not without destroying democracy first. The question is whether we're paying attention, whether we'll see it coming, whether we'll make different choices. History says we won't, but history gets written by the people who didn't learn the lesson. Maybe we're different. Maybe this time is different. What do you think?